Hi, I'm Charlie Collins, and we're talking sport. And you're welcome to Talking Sports. Loads of sport to talk about this weekend. Some of it very controversial, so I've decided to call two of our most experienced journalists into studio today because, as I said, a lot of serious stuff on the agenda. We've got Harry Walsh from the Donegal News and Ciaran O'Donnell from the Donegal Democrat. They've got big titles, but everybody knows what they are, so no need to go into that. We're going to start, guys, with the dream team: Martin O'Neill, Roy Keane. Martin O'Neill officially unveiled tomorrow, we understand, but the cat's out of the bag anyway. They've signed the contracts. And first question to both of you, and I'm coming to you, Harry, first of all. When you heard it, Martin O'Neill, manager, Roy Keane, assistant, what did you think?
Surprised. Pleasantly surprised, I must say. I think, given the resources we have, the players we have at the moment, Martin O'Neill, excellent choice. Roy Keane, we all know about Saipan, but as somebody says, that's 11 years ago. Do we give him time to go on? But definitely, Martin O'Neill couldn't have picked a better man, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, Ciaran, what was your first reaction?
Yeah, I suppose it was the worst kept secret, I suppose, because it was touted for a long time. It seemed that it wasn't going to happen, Charlie. I mean, obviously there was something going on behind the scenes. Was it the fact that it had to be that Roy Keane have to be part of the deal?
Yeah.
Is there more to it than just who? I would be kind of keen to see who appointed the deal. Was there someone behind the scenes saying that?
Well, here's Dermot Desmond. Actually, was the kingmaker
so
here.
I wonder. You know, obviously there's a bit of history between Delaney and Roy Keane. That seems to be patched up now. But we were talking about Roy Keane being anybody's number two. I know Joe Jackson had a song about it. You know, would he be my number two? I can see Roy Keane actually. That's going to be the test for the setup and the system. Will he be a number two? He was the gaffer when he was on the pitch for Man United. He was the gaffer when he was the pitch for the Republic of Ireland. He was the gaffer at Ipswich. So how he reacts to being a number two will be the key.
I've seen Jarlath Duffy with a thing on Facebook today with the Irish players in the dressing room and Roy standing there. When I say jump, jump. When I say talk, talk. When I say, and you know, maybe that's a little bit extreme, but you're looking at it thinking you might be onto something there, you know, because of the personality that he is. And I know that people are saying that himself and Martin O'Neill have become good friends and all that sort of stuff, you know, and O'Neill is almost 20 years older than him, a lot more experience and, you know, relatively good track record. If you take the Celtic situation out of Martin O'Neill's managerial career, it's not that brilliant, particularly at the top level. But where's Keane going to fit in terms of the day-to-day thing? And I know it's probably not day-to-day thing, Harry, with an international team, but at the same time, there's a lot of work on it now. What's his role going to be? Where's he going to fit?
Well, that's the $1 million question, Charlie. I mean, the days when you and I were playing, when it was acceptable to hop a cup off a wall and roar and shout, I mean, that's gone. That's gone out with the arc, you know. And okay, Martin O'Neill, 61, and he might roar and shout, and Keane might roar and shout, but the current day professionals, they won't accept that, you know. So the very fact they're only in the camp a couple of days before a big international match, I don't know. I mean, by all accounts, Steve Walford, the former Arsenal defender, he'll do all the coaching on the coaching ground. Martin O'Neill never done that with Leicester or Villa or anybody else. Walford done that for him. And Roy Keane, will Roy Keane be going around watching matches and trying to, you know, pick rough diamonds and polish them up and what have you, you know, because his record at Sunderland wasn't great, you know, the calibre player he brought in. He didn't bring in too many rough diamonds.
Yeah. Funny, somebody said to me earlier this week, Ciaran, I thought it was a very good point, because of the reputation of the two men and particularly the personalities, the players are more likely to be watching what Keane's about than what Martin O'Neill's about, and that's bound to cause a problem as well.
Well, the first thing is there was nearly more talk about Roy Keane than actually Martin O'Neill being the manager, even though he was the assistant. I suppose going back, there are two. My first thing was when I heard that was the appointment. Whoever gets the shirt will earn it, and whoever stays in the team will earn their place on the team. So, you know, in terms of the quality of players that's available for at the minute, you know, I suppose we're not laden down with huge quality players. Having said that, the one thing that these two appointments will have the ability to get the best out of the players. You know, listen to Harry, you know, it's a good point, because, you know, Roy Keane's, will that be a role for him? Because it didn't happen on the Trapattoni's role in terms of going to look at players and see players so that could be where he could be very, very good. The only thing was, say, like, we're 11 years on with Ciaran, he would have matured as a person, and obviously he's a great guy and a great understanding for the game. But going back a little bit, from the earliest childhood memories of the Irish team was, say, the mid to late 70s, there was a very good team there. They didn't, unfortunately, want the Jays thing fulfill anything. But that hard work ethic thing with the likes of Tony Grealish and those sort of boys, I think that Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane will instill that and a wee bit of passion and pride back in the team.
Yeah. Can the two of them bring the Jack Charlton sort of kudo to the whole thing, do you think? And I mean, we'll come to Mick McCarthy in a minute, just his reaction yesterday, but he did relatively well when you look at his record with the Republic. But I suppose we all look back to the Charlton era as a real golden era, the World Cups, the European Championships, and that's where we want to be, Harry. Now, as Ciaran says, you mightn't have that quality of player, but then good managers bring out the best and even mediocre players.
Absolutely, and going back to O'Neill again, in his Leicester days, I mean, the names don't trip off the tongue, but I remember the likes of Steve Walsh and Steve Guppy, Steve Claridge, all the Steves, and Muzzy Izzet, players like that, they weren't household names, but I mean, Muzzy ended up playing for Turkey. He wouldn't have got playing for Turkey if it wasn't for Leicester winning those 2 League Cups. And they were an average team, and that's the plate word for them. That's what they were.
Funny you mention him. I saw him on Sky being interviewed there with Paul Merson and that, that show they do, the boot room or whatever, and he gave a lot of credit to Martin O'Neill, because I think he was at Chelsea or Arsenal. He left to go to Leicester. He wasn't getting a game. I think it was Chelsea.
It was, yeah.
And he said that the thing that made him was Martin O'Neill said to him, "I'm putting you in my team." And he says once he heard that, his confidence soared and that sort of stuff. Now, Martin O'Neill's a good motivator, I mean, and we know that about him. But the balance between him and Keane is just going to be so interesting. Here's the other question I'll ask both of you now as well. If they were in managerial jobs, if they both had jobs, would there been any chance of them taking this on?
We'll never know, Charlie. Martin O'Neill may be 61 years old. He's been there, done that. But Roy Keane might still want a big, so-called big club job.
So is he using this to heighten his profile and say, "Hey boys, don't forget me," because he left Ipswich and the word was, Harry, he was going to have trouble getting another job?
That's right, and he hasn't got a job since, and he's been an ITV pundit, as you said in your column in the paper today, Charlie. That's what he's been doing since. He's a TV pundit.
After saying he'd never do it.
That's right. Go to the dentist.
Rather go to the dentist. Yeah.
So Martin O'Neill, I think the timing's right for him. There might be a lot of similarities, hopefully, with Jack Charlton at the stage of the career he's at. He's still hungry. He's a very passionate Irishman. And he'll get the best out of whatever group of players he has. Yeah. Hopefully the people went into self-imposed exile. They'll all come out of it now. Now whether they'll get playing or not's another question, because some the likes of the Buckford Forest, what's his name, the left-footed player. Andy Reid.
Andy Reid, he was back in the squad there.
Absolutely. I still think the jury's out on him personally, because he's a luxury player, and the modern game is a room for luxury players.
That's a good question. Good question. Mick McCarthy's reaction was interesting yesterday, and I heard about it. I found it. It took me a long time to actually see it. I'd heard about it, and then they showed it, and he just wasn't prepared to say anything. I know there's a problem there with him and Keane, and he feels hard done by from what happened, because as far as he's concerned, I've heard him verbalise this, it wasn't his fault, Did
he also want the job, and was he he didn't get it?
Well, Chris McNulty tweeted, in fact, that he wasn't prepared to have talks.
That's
I saw Chris, so that's, why would he not? Maybe he thought, listen, I'm good enough, offer me the job, don't insult me by calling me in for an interview with Ray Houghton and that other guy, And
I would say, once he realised that there would be a question posed in relation to Roy Keane, he just had his mind made up that he obviously wasn't going to answer them.
Yeah, but John Delaney, in fair play to him, said Saipan's a long time ago and draw a line in the sand. Mick McCarthy obviously hasn't, and he was more in the middle of it than John Delaney was.
Yeah, well, I mean, if his comment, there's no comment. That was his prerogative, and that's the decision. But I mean, I suppose it's drawn more attention to him.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, we'll leave it and hope for the best. Harry's was the way to do it. As you say, Martin O'Neill, if Martin O'Neill had been appointed on his own, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be saying, as you said, he's a good appointment. But the Keane element, and I suppose this is what Roy Keane's all about, he's made headlines since he appeared on the scene for Nottingham Forest a long time ago. You just hope that he's calmer and milder, and that he'll bring positives rather than, Eamon Dunphy, who I don't always agree with, says it's a train crash waiting to happen. Hopefully.
Eamon Dunphy's a few bob on each way, it's going to be a win or a loser or a draw, he can't win,
Absolutely. Well, hope for the best.
Hope for the best, is right.
Okay. We're hoping for the best for a good appointment for Finn Harps in Derry City as well. Let's just stick to the Harps situation again. I think it was in your paper, Harry, and again it was mentioned Democrat. They had the first series of interviews last week, and they're into the second series of interviews as well. Whoever comes in is going to know they're coming in, and they're not going to have many resources. And I mean, that's not a great start point, but that's the reality of it.
Very much so. I mean, the talk about Julian Dix coming over from West Ham. I mean, I see you throwing the eyes up to the sky there, Charlie. You know, and Donna Reardon come back from China. I mean, geez, no harm to Don, but stay in China. And I mean, I was lucky enough and privileged enough to play for Finn Harps in my day. But it's hard to know what to do. Joe Boyle, he's based locally, a school teacher. Would he be a better appointment? And deviating briefly now, but the Inishowen League beat the Donegal League on Wednesday night. Hammered them. Yeah. And I was chatting to Dermot O'Brien, the manager, and I says, how did you get here? And they've been bringing lads up through the Inishowen schoolboys system. And Ciaran's got a young fella, Navy young fella, both involved underage at Donegal schoolboy systems. And that to me would be the way to go. Yeah. Get them in at under 12, under 14, under 16. The same with the GA, the development squads and what have you. And forget about winning titles, winning leagues for a number of years.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. No. And I mean, Felix Healy famously because I remember it, but at one stage Harps' budget was close on something crazy, closer on $1 million than it was, a couple of 100,000. And he says, give me the $500,000 and I'll spend it on developing a pool of players and talented players. That to me where Finn Harps have to go. There's no point. I mean, the likes of Ronnie Murphy, the boys I can remember from years gone by. Yeah. It was a holiday camp coming up to Donegal, and I mean that in the best sense of the word. They were coming up for weekends crack. And getting a few bob thrown in and had to play 90 minutes of football. They're going to have to go back to basics, go back to local lads. And I thought Peter Hutton was trying to do that, It
looked as if he was, And Ciaran, that's the way they're going to have to go. They're going to have to stick local here because the finances aren't there really. And as Harry says, if you're bringing players in, you're going to have to pay them X amount and the money's not going to be there. And the one thing that Harps have to try and do is get people through the turnstiles, because we've all talked about this and we've all written about this. This can only go on for a certain length of time before the door has to be closed. Yeah.
I suppose we don't want to sound like the Grim Reapers, but what you're saying is factually correct, and what Harry's saying is factually correct. I think it's about this feeder system too, and it's been tried different ways, and it hasn't actually taken off. And what's happening now is you've got the schoolboys thing, and it's developed into the emerging talent, and there's a very good structure there with very good coaches in place. And underneath that, you've got the underage teams, and kind of ironically or coincidentally, you've got Kevin McHugh and James Doherty are taking up the under 12s of our boys who were born in 2002, and that's the first sort of a departure for the likes of Kevin McHugh and James Doherty, and I think it's a great appointment. Yeah. So but it's how does that filter into the guys of Finn Harps? As should the Donegal League and the Donegal schoolboys teams, should their ultimate aim to be feeding the best of their players into the system that comes under the umbrella of Finn Harps?
Sure, Ciaran, listen, we know, and we've all been involved long enough to know it's far too fragmented in Donegal. So all the leagues are fragmented.
And all they're doing is looking after one another rather than say, well, there's a willingness there to sort of encompass all the leagues, the Inishowen League, Donegal League, the Southern Leagues, and see what you have.
As Harry made the point, if the Inishowen League are going to come every year and beat the Donegal League, then the Donegal League have got to look at themselves and say, there's something wrong here. No harm. The Inishowen, you say, Harry, have progressed well, and they got to the final of a national competition, and that's a big, big deal. And if they're struggling down there, Harps are going to struggle. And I mean, listen, I suppose we shouldn't be throwing out names, but I'm going to throw a name out. Sean he's been there for a long time and done great work at underage level and bringing players through, and he's interested in getting the job. Surely now's the time to say to him, right, here's a 2-year contract, see how you get on, because I feel he'll do as well as anybody else coming in will do.
No, that's a very fair point too, Charlie. But as Ciaran says, the structures have to be right from the bottom up. Yeah. And we've talked about it. We spoke about it ad infinitum. I've written about it, and you've been on the radio, etc. And yourself, Ciaran. And unfortunately, there's always a but with Finn Harps. Yeah. And I say I love them to the day of day. Yeah. But there's a but, and here's me saying the but already.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they make the right choice. Right. Moving to another sport, AP McCoy. Watched him yesterday ride his 4,000 winner. And I mean, it's only when they started to give the stats about what that is in relation. Perspective's a great thing. Richard Johnson's the next highest 2,567. And Ruby Walsh, who seems to win races like all the time, 2,220. Less than 50, well, just over past the 50% point of what Mc Coy's record. Harry, I'll start with you again. It's just incredible.
Phenomenal. I was listening this morning on the television, and I think he put it very apt himself when he said, "We're one of the few sports that's been followed by an ambulance."
Yeah.
And I thought that just summed it up. It's a dangerous sport.
Very dangerous.
And
he's broken nearly every bone in his body.
Absolutely. And to win, he wrote his first winner in Thurles back in 1992.
17 years of age.
You know, and I mean, we can all remember 92, what we were at.
Yeah. And I mean, JP McManus, I think, summed it up when they showed it in Sky yesterday. He said, and JP McManus, we know, is a very wealthy man and all interesting. He said, "I'm proud to be part of AP McCoy's team." I thought that was some compliment for the job. Now, AP had thanked him and John Joe O'Neill and all the other people, but for JP McManus, who's had so much success, to say that, what a compliment.
Yeah, it's a relatively young man, 39, he's not 40 yet.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
champion jockey 18 times, or 19, sorry.
I mean, all the superiors have been rolled out at this stage, but it's a good news story, Charlie, even though it's in the sporting circles. I mean, the front page today, the Irish Times, for example, great action picture. It's a wee lift for everybody, you know, and it's good. And, you know, history doesn't come along all that often, I'm sure, for something like that. So it's great then, you know.
Yeah.
Good luck then.
And what I like about him, Harry, is the modesty of the man. I mean, he's so modest a guy, and I mean, he tried for 15 or 16 years to win the Grand National, and when he won it, he was like a child winning it, you know, because it's the holy grail, obviously, for national hunt and that type of stuff. But he's such a nice fella, Tony McCoy, and so complimentary about everybody around him, including his other jockeys.
Very much so, and I think it's that youthful enthusiasm that's keeping him so young. You know, he's as Ciaran said there, he's 39, but he's one of the lads.
Yeah.
He's in the stable rooms every day, and he's out riding every day, and and the superlative is used far too often, but he really is a great Irish sportsman.
Oh yeah, great credit for Ireland. Well, great credit for Donegal. We have 4 Hurling All Stars in the Nicky Rackard team, and Donegal, of course, won it this year. Lee Henderson, Danny Cullen, Sean McVeigh, and Christopher McDermott. And we make a big thing when we get a football All Star, rightly so. But I mean, this is great, Ciaran, for the boys, and reflects where Donegal hurling's at the moment and the great work that's been done there.
Yeah, I suppose I can only kind of comment locally, and I know St Ciaran's, for example, my own club, are doing huge work and have been there for the last 10 or 12 years, and it's starting to sort of pay off. And up around here as well, where hurling wasn't strong, Charlie, or traditionally strong, I started getting there. And I suppose to widen it a wee bit more, I mean, the entertainment values that the hurling gave this year, I mean, there's never a bad hurling game, I don't think you can say, but I thought the quality of the hurling and the All-Ireland Championship Series this year was
incredible.
second
well,
to none.
I commentated on the Nicky Rackard final.
Right.
On the Saturday, and they played Roscommon. It was an incredible game, and Lee Henderson, I mean, Sean McVeigh got a fantastic goal, and Lee Henderson pucked over points from it. Was Martin McHugh was with me, and he said to me, he put a point over from near the 70-metre line out down below us in the press here, and you've all been up there. And Martin says to me, he says, if that was Henry Shefflin or some of the Kellys from Tipperary or Waterford, we'd be saying, oh my God, the skill and the talent of that man, you know. But to get 4 Hurling All Stars, even at Nicky Rackard, and as you say, it's been a great season, so well done to them young lads. Pete McGrath going to be the new manager of Fermanagh, Harry, but a wee bit of surprise there. Just looking, I mean, he won All Irelands with Down in 91 and 94, so nearly 20 years ago, so great to see him coming back into management. And you can't say no harm to Fermanagh, that it's a very, you know, high profile sort of a job, but I suppose it shows that Pete McGrath's in love with the game.
Absolutely, and 2 decades is it. Will he still have all the moves, and like Donegal now, 13 men behind the ball one day and 13 men in front of the ball the next day. You know, it's the good old days. The cornerback stay in the corner doesn't work anymore. You know,
no, for sure. And just moving on to the club scene, Glen Swilly through to the Ulster Club semi-final. Again, perspective here. I mean, it's an incredible achievement. It's an incredible achievement for Glen Swilly to won the county championship for a start.
It was, but you know, looking back on it, Charlie, and I've had this conversation with a few people. To me, Glen Swilly are the best team in Donegal by a bit at the minute.
Yeah.
They were very worthy county champions, and I was over actually support them on Sunday. I thought while St Gauls did kick away some of the game, defensively Glen Swilly were very good. They wasted nothing in front of goal. They got six opportunities the first half, back 1-5.
Yeah.
St Gauls had 12 and had 4.
Yeah.
And then at half time, in a very good position. The goal was the turning point. What they do have Michael Murphy, obviously, but I mean, there's more to the team than Michael Murphy, but he's a great leader and he's a good example. And when he needs to sort of hit the turbo or do something that's going to change the game, he's done it.
Some of the points he scored in the second half.
Exactly, and he's done it for Donegal too, so he's a big game player, so the bigger the stakes are, the better Michael Murphy steps up to. But Gary McDaid deserves a lot of credit as well, and his backroom team. I'll tell you what I did notice, it for 5 minutes before we went down at half time, the management team and the stats men, there were 5 minutes actually on the pitch. So they weren't going into sort of waffle. They were going to say they were delivering factual information.
Well, you know where I saw that first from them was down against St Michael's at the Bridge in the league format. They spent about 8 or 9 minutes. It took them 8 or 9 to get from where they were to the dressing room. So
ultimately, the message was going to be very clear and very concise. And get away from Harry's point, if I was rather going off on one, I was going to be, this is where we're at, this is what we've done. And I mean, they were in a great position at half time. I really couldn't see them losing the game.
And they have good leaders in the dressing room as well. They have good talkers on there as well, Harry.
They do. And on that point, on the county final Sunday, I remember interviewing 2 or 3 of them post-match, and it was a struggle against Killybegs at half time. And that was one of the questions I asked afterwards, what was said to you at half time. And to a man, they came back to me and says, well, we discussed it among ourselves at half time. And then when Gary and the boys came in, they reaffirmed. So the players seem to have that 5 minutes among themselves to sort it out. And then, as Ciaran said, the management then come in and say, do A, B and C. But the players seem to be mature enough to have it thrashed out themselves before the boys come in.
We'll throw this out and say that if it ever happens, we were the first to say it. Gary McDaid, former potential to be a county senior team manager in the future. I'm not sure if he'd be interested, but...
Well, I mean, he's young. His record speaks for itself. And, where this journey goes now for Ulster Club, they have a potential to go a bit,
Yeah. No, with due respect to Rosslea, Glen Swilly have a chance of making the final, Harry, which would be some achievement.
Very much so, Charlie. But then to keep it in perspective, it's in Healy Park in Omagh. Looking outside today, the weather's miserable. The ground will be soft. It's the second of 2 games that afternoon, so the bounce of the ball will be different. The pitch will be probably full of sand, and so they're all things that even things up. I mean, man to man, I think the bookies have them strong favourites, and please God, they will beat Rosslea. But let's not just get ahead of ourselves just yet with that.
And Milford are in the junior semi-final against Killeashel from Tyrone. Well done to them. Nigel Black doing a great job. They had a great one last weekend after extra time, and they're in Brewster Park actually on that same day. And local, closer to home, a couple of playoffs in Division 2, Glenfin against Termon, Neve against McCool's. There's been all sorts of shenanigans going on. We won't go into it, but those are the 2 fixtures. Glenfin, Termon Saturday, and good man Ciaran. Sunday it's Neve versus McCool's, and then on Sunday as well in Killybegs, Kilcar versus Neve Connell in the under-21. Harry, you're over that direction, so you have a good insight to what's going on. I think this is Neve Connell's 8th in a row, and Kilcar, everybody knows, an emerging team. Martin McHugh tells me mightn't be strong enough to beat Neve Connell, but he always says that about Kilcar teams. That'll be a good final.
Very much so. I mean, Neve Connell's record speaks for itself, and there's an example of a club that decided a dozen years ago or more that something wasn't going quite right. So they just stripped back the underage structure, and the results are speaking for themselves now, and they're getting players coming through year after year after year. But Kilcar, possibly even more remarkable, as I've said to you in the past, my good ladies from Kilcar. And I give the example, I never seen 45 men in Kilcar in my life before. No. And then on a Sunday afternoon they can produce 3 teams. They come home from Dublin, they come home from Carndonagh, Letterkenny, or wherever they're at, but they play to a system. And they play to that system, and a system that works for them. It's a system that's worked in James McHugh's time and Martin's time that they've now carried on 20, 30 years down the road. And you can see it. They played 4 Masters and under-16 divisional final in Ardra during the week. Got well beat, very well beat. But you can see they were playing to a system. So little Johnny comes in to corner back. He knows the system to play. And I mean, that's where the modern game has gone now. And Kilcar played very, very well. And
I suppose, Ciaran, if we think about Neve Connell, 8 under-21 finals in a row, they really haven't done enough at senior level when you think on that talent that's coming through every year for them.
I mean, as Harry said, from under 12, even at the minute, you can see them. I mean, we've all had our encounters with them down the season this year. But I mean, they do have the ability to produce very good teams from here very early on. But to back up your point, once they get to under 21, and they seem to have dominated that age group for so long, it hasn't sort of
manifested itself,
and to sort of putting a stamp on the senior championship. That's probably something that the club will probably look at again. They're probably disappointed, but I suppose the fact that they're back in an under-21 final again, gives them a sort of impetus to say, well, we can push on, maybe make it in the senior ranks again. I suppose I was surprised that they didn't figure as well in this year's championship as you know.
Rugby this weekend, we're not going to talk too much about Ireland start against Samoa, England, Argentina, Wales, South Africa, Scotland, Japan, France, New Zealand and Italy, Argentina, and of course Ireland will be playing against Australia and New Zealand in the coming weeks as well. Good to see nearly everybody's back. Paul O'Connell's not starting tomorrow, but he's been named as captain. Sports Star Awards 2013, are you guys on that committee? No,
I used to be. I haven't not in recent years, Charlie.
And they're looking for nominations now. And just when I saw it, the thought struck me again: the amount of talent that we have always comes out at the awards. I see that the Hall of Fame one has already been selected. Nobody here. Nobody here, I presume.
Definitely not.
Nobody here. And,
I'm too young anyway.
The other one that I was thinking, and again might be a wee bit unfair, but anyway, I think we could nearly decide here who's going to get the overall award for 2013, and he had a nice homecoming there. But again, get your nominations into Paul McDade and get them in before the end of November, I think's the date. But again, that when you see them listed, and it jumps out at you how much talent we have, Harry.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously, winning the All Ireland last year was a massive boost for the county. But in individual sports, I mean, we don't have enough time now. But athletics, you got your Mark English's, Brendan Boyce's, you got Chloe McGee's, an Olympian as well. You can go through obviously the boxers, sport after sport after sport. We're, to use that expression, but we really are punching above our weight. Yeah, and it gives the county a great lift.
No doubt about it. Ciaran, you'd agree with that, obviously.
For sure. I mean, you listen to Hayden every Sunday, you look at the newspapers on a Monday, you know, there's so much going on, there's so much success there, and there's such an appetite for people to know what's going on as well.
Yeah. Right, I better mention Arsenal, Harry, because you'll be not pleased if I don't, and neither will he. So I'm kind of outnumbered here today, but top of the table and looking good. I have to say, I actually put something up on Facebook. I mean, when they lost against Aston Villa, sacked the manager, get rid of him, he's there too long, blah, blah, blah. Osel's been a fantastic signing. I got to give him a lot of credit. But it makes it's always more interesting when Man U and Man City and Chelsea aren't completely dominating. You've got Liverpool, my crowd Spurs are not going too bad. Arsenal are going fantastic. But, you know, Arsenal, look, they're impressive.
Absolutely, but I suppose I'll get to that first. You win nothing in November, Charlie.
I'm glad you said that.
it's next May. But they are. And again, like Ciaran, lifelong Arsenal supporter, and I think Wenger, I would love to have shares in Arsenal. But the one thing Arsenal are that most other top flight teams aren't, they're solvent.
Yeah.
I mean, they built a new stadium. They own a new stadium now, and he's been frugal in recent years, but promoting young talent, the likes of Aaron Ramsey now. Fantastic. And I mean, they've 7 or 8 lads, the likes of Diaby, the likes of Walcott, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Podolski, Abu Diaby. They would be first choice in most teams. They're not injured. People are always saying what happens when players get injured with Arsenal. Yeah. Arsenal have 7 or 8 first team players injured at the moment. So when they come back, I mean, we love the dream and we love the way they play football. So when you have me in here next May, please God, they'll want to
finish runners up behind Spurs.
Arteta wasn't playing for a good part of the season.
That's
part
right.
of the season too. I mean, he's the person who makes them tick, But they're 9-2, I think, to win the Premiership at the minute. But when they played the first game against
Villa.
Fenerbahce, was it?
Oh yes.
Yeah. And after the Villa game, Richard Sadler was on and talk about a load of crap.
Yeah.
They had won this and didn't won this, whatever. They couldn't
Can we say that?
They couldn't play.
I think we just have.
They couldn't say that Arsenal played well. It was how bad Fenerbahce were, and how much this was going to mean to Arsenal, that they were given the potential to buy players. One result, the last 3-1. It should have been 2-2. We should play it back to them. But again, play it back now and in May, as Harry says.
We'll have you back in May and let you gloat for half an hour.
By the way, Jared, before you go, there's a day over in London every day they're called Tottenham Day.
Yes.
I celebrated Arsenal. It's when it's mathematically impossible for Spurs to catch Arsenal, and it's usually celebrated around Christmas time.
That'll be later this time. I just want to mention, we'll do a bit of bumming here. We were in the Relex Fire Web Awards finals. Talking Sport was in the final, down to the last 7. They were held on Wednesday night. It was in the best independent podcast. Comic Cast won it, and Talking Sport came runner-up So, fantastic, delighted. And that's all down to everybody who's come on the show over the last 6 months. And, of course, to Tommy and Timmy here at Full Tilt Studios for looking after me so well every week here. So that's it from Talking Sport for this week. We'll be back more thanks to my guest, Harry Walsh and Ciaran O'Donnell. Until we hear from you again, or you hear from us, all the best.